Hey guys, welcome to the Eerie Side Podcast with your host Dee,
Elena,
and Sophia.
We appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you are ready to get on the eerie side. Before we get into the show, we would appreciate if you all could give the podcast a follow and make sure the bell notification is turned on so you'll be notified whenever we drop an episode. If you enjoy the show, we would love to have you leave us a review, and if there's a case suggestion or any feedback you'd like to share, feel free to send us a message in the text box below. Share the podcast with family, friends, co-workers, or really anyone you think will enjoy it. Please follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Have you guys heard of what's going on with Casey Anthony now?
Oh, she's on
Interview.
TikTok.
Yeah, she's on TikTok.
Oh, no. Okay.
I saw that. That's crazy.
Okay, what is she doing on TikTok?
Okay, real quick for anyone who doesn't know, Casey Anthony was, I guess, acquitted in 2011 of killing her daughter, Kaylee Anthony, but most people do not believe that. But okay, so she's on TikTok and she was saying that she's an advocate for people who are having to go through the legal system and that she's been working in the legal system since 2011, which was her acquittal day. And she was just positioning herself as somebody who, now I don't think this is the right thing to do, but is offering legal advice to people. And I don't even think she's an attorney, so I don't know what she's doing. And
She's not.
what's funny is somebody even asked video recorded Gypsy Rose, and they were like, hey, what do you think of Casey Anthony giving people legal advice? Do you think that's okay since she's not an attorney? And even Gypsy was like, no, that's not okay. And in case anyone doesn't know who Gypsy is, she was the one who was being held captive. Well, her mom was basically making her sick and saying she was sick with all these medical issues when that wasn't true. And then she had her boyfriend that she met online murder her mom. And now she's been out of prison for some time too. But very interesting. So just wanted to share that with you all in case you hadn't heard. Casey Anthony is on TikTok, and I don't know what she thinks she's doing there, but that's just what's been going on in the true crime world this week.
Thank you for sharing, Sophia. Good to know. All right, now we're going to move to our podcast story. Today, I'm going to explore a case that gripped the nation for years. The disappearance of Chandra Levy, who was a 24-year-old intern at the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Washington, D.C. Who's Chandra Levy? Do you guys know the story?
You know, her name is familiar. And was she in D.C.?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I can't remember all of it, but I do think I have learned about it before. It'll come back to me.
No, as of right now, I don't think I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so Chandra Levy was a bright and promising young woman who was intelligent, ambitious, and driven. Born on April 14, 1977, Chandra was born in Cleveland, Ohio to Robert and Susan Levy. Eventually, the family moved to Modesto, California. Her parents remember her as being individualistic, fun-loving, and sometimes bossy with her younger brother, Adam. Levy was also ambitious from a young age and dreamt to either joining the FBI or becoming a lawyer when she grew up. Now, she attended San Francisco State University, where she earned a degree in journalism. After entering for the California Bureau of Secondary Education and working in the office of the Los Angeles Mayor Richard Riordan, she began attending the University of Southern California to earn a master's degree in public administration. As part of her final semester of study, Chandra moved to Washington, D.C. to become a paid intern with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. In October 2000, she began her internship in the Bureau's headquarters, where she was assigned to the Public Affairs Division. Her supervisor, Bureau spokesperson Dan Dune, was impressed with Sandra's work. Sandra's internship was abruptly terminated in April of 2001 because her academic eligibility was found to have expired in December of 2000. She had already completed her master's degree requirements and was scheduled to return to California in May 2001 for graduation. She was known for being hardworking, but she was also a social person, enjoying time with friends, exercising, and exploring the city. By all accounts, Chandra had a promising future ahead of her. Now, let's take a step back in time to 2001 and piece together the chilling details of her disappearance. On May 1, 2001, Chandra Levy was last seen, and her life would take an unexpected and tragic turn. The assumption is she had gone for a jog in Rock Creek Park, just a short distance from her apartment. The Metropolitan Police Department, which I will be calling MPD from now, was first alerted on May 6, when Sandra's parents called from Modesto to report they had not heard from their daughter in 5 days. Police called hospitals and visited Sandra's apartment in DuPont Circle that day, finding no indication of foul play. Now, police didn't obtain the security footage in Sandra's apartment until more than 7 days had passed. They were unable to determine what time she left or if she left alone. The footage was recorded over every 7 days. With no leads from the investigators, Sandra's mom looked through her daughter's phone bill to find answers. The statement showed numerous calls by Chandra to the same cell phone number, which ended up being a U.S. congressman.
Oh, yeah.
On May 7, Sandra's father told the police that his daughter had been having an affair with a U.S. congressman. Sandra's aunt also called the police and told them that Chandra had confided in her about the affair. Police obtained a warrant on May 10 to conduct a formal search of Sandra's apartment. Investigators found her credit cards, identification, and mobile phone left behind in her purse, along with a partially packed suitcase. The answering machine was full, with messages left by her relatives and 2 from the congressman. A police sergeant tried to examine Sandra's laptop computer and inadvertently corrupted the internet search data, as he was not a trained technician. Computer experts took a month to reconstruct the data to determine that the laptop was used on the morning of May 1st to search for websites related to Amtrak, Baskin-Robbins, the Congressman, Southwest Airlines, and a weather report from the Washington Post. Her final search was at 12:59 p.m. was for Alsace-Lorraine, a region in France. A particular search at 11:33 a.m. was for information about the Creek Park in the Washington Post Entertainment Guide. Then at 11:34 a.m., she clicked a link to bring a map of the park. There was no sign of Chandra when investigators searched the area. In addition, detectives later theorized, and I'm not even sure if this is true, that she might have met someone at the Pierce Klingle Mansion, which houses the park headquarters. On July 25, 2001, 3 D.C. police sergeants and 28 police cadets served along Glover Road in the park, but failed to find evidence of Chandra. Later, a second attempt found nothing. Well, who was the congressman that Chandra Levy was having an affair with? It was Gary Condit, a married congressman from California, and 28 years her senior.
I just knew he was going to be married.
Yes. He represented the congressional district in which the Levy family resided. At first, he denied that he had an affair with her. Although police stated that Condit was not a suspect, Levy's family said they felt Condit was being evasive and possibly hiding information about the matter.
So my question is, they didn't get to look at the video footage at her apartment until she was missing for over 7 days?
At the 7th day, I think they went, yes. Or she was missing the 7th day.
I feel like they took a while to get to that, but I don't know what the timeline looked like.
The police did one thing after the other that really affected everything that happened to Chandra, and that was just one from the very beginning.
Yeah, 7 days is long.
Well, they waited so many days before they even got a search warrant. So, how did they meet? Condit had been introduced to Chandra when her friend visited his office for a tour of the Capitol. While Condit and Chandra led a life of secrecy, Chandra's parents believed she was happy and content in D.C. Chandra told her aunt, Linda Zemsky, over Thanksgiving that she had a relationship with a congressman in his 50s who looked like Harrison Ford. That December, Chandra also mentioned the affair in an email that she sent to a friend. This is what she said to her friend, quote, "Everything else here in D.C. is going good. My man will be coming back when Congress starts up again. Don't tell," and in parentheses she has a person who was a friend in Conduit's office, "who I'm seeing since she thinks I'm dating an FBI agent," she wrote.
Wait, who thought she was dating an FBI agent?
A friend of theirs who was working in Condit's office.
Oh, so she didn't even know that she was dating Condit.
No, they had it as a secret affair.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering because at this point, Chandra is not necessarily saying who it is, but she is telling people, hey, I'm dating this congressman.
So she did tell her aunt and her friend,
Right.
but she wasn't telling other people.
Not only one person can keep a secret, so the more people she's telling, the more concerning it could get for the secret being released.
All right, most likely in April, before she had flown back. However, Chandra called her aunt, Zemsky, and left a message saying that she had something important to tell her. Zemsky never learned what that something was. Just a few days later, on May 1st, 2001, Chandra disappeared and was never seen again.
Wait, she said she had something to tell her aunt?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, maybe. I'm just making a guess, but maybe it's a pregnancy.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
You also have to wonder if Condit is involved, why now? Why would she go missing now?
Zemsky never learned what that something was. Just a few days later, on May 1st, 2001, Chandra disappeared and was never seen again. For a few weeks, the case went unnoticed by the broader public, but all that changed when the media caught wind of a possible connection between Chandra and the high-profile political figure. Unidentified police sources alleged that Condit had admitted to an affair with Chandra during an interview with law enforcement officers on July 7th of 2001. That's 2 months later. Condit described her to the police as a vegetarian who avoided drinking and smoking. He thought that Chandra was going to return to Washington, D.C. after her graduation and was surprised to find out that the lease on her had ended. Investigators searched Condit's apartment on July 10th. A twist to the story is that law officers also questioned flight attendant Anne-Marie Smith. Who is Anne-Marie Smith, you may ask? Smith was involved in an affair with Condit also. Smith claimed that Condit told her she did not need to speak to the Federal Bureau of Investigation about his personal life. Federal officers began investigating Condit for possible obstruction of justice. Smith was not acquainted with Chandra. Upset by leaks to media, Condit refused to submit to a polygraph test by D.C. police. His attorney asserted that Condit passed the test administered by a privately hired examiner on July 13th. Intensive coverage until the news of September 11th attacks superseded the media coverage of Chandra's case. Condit's involvement in the case drew intense media attention, with many speculating that he had something to do with Chandra's disappearance. The political angle added a layer of intrigue to an already tragic story. In fact, reporters began camping out near Condit's house, trying to get a glimpse of information about the case. Sandra's parents and friends held numerous vigils and press conferences in an attempt to bring Chandra home. In 2002, a major breakthrough occurred of sorts. On May 2nd, 2002, a man called 911 when he found a skull in a remote area of Rock Creek Park near Broad Branch Creek. Investigators were quick to determine the skull belonged to Chandra with dental records, but could not determine a cause of death. However, forensic evidence found near the skull, including a pair of jogging pants with knots tied at the bottom of her ankles, did indicate foul play.
Wait, so how long officially has she been missing for?
1 year.
Okay.
Investigators believe the knotted pants could be evidence that Chandra was restrained before her death. Detectives found bones and personal items scattered, but not buried, in a forested area along a steep incline. A sports bra, sweatshirt, underwear, running shoes, and a Sony Walkman were among the evidence that was recovered. A preliminary autopsy was performed. District of Columbia Police announced that there was sufficient evidence to open a homicide investigation. On May 28th, D.C., medical examiner officially declared Chandra's death a homicide, but he said, quote, "There's less to work with than I would like. It's possible we will never know specifically how she died," end quote. He found damage to her hyoid bone, suggesting that she was possibly strangled, but he did not deem it to be conclusive evidence of such a cause of death. On June 6, after the police completed their search, private investigators hired by the Levys found her shin bone and some twisted wire about 25 yards, which is 23 meters, from the other remains. Police Charles H. Ramsey said, quote, "It's unacceptable that these items were not located," end quote. Although police had previously searched over half the 1,754-acre main section of the park, the wooded slope where Chandra's remains were eventually found had not been searched.
Why?
Well, let me get into it. Due to the miscommunication, the MPD of the District of Columbia failed to follow its own search parameters in the Rock Creek Park, leaving Chandra's body to decompose for 1 year. Police commanders ordered the search perimeters to be within 100 yards, which is 91 meters, of each road and trail, but due to a miscommunication, the officers only searched within 100 yards of every road. The remains were found about 4 miles, 6 kilometers from Chandra's apartment. The MPD had been informed, but soon dismissed, the information that Igmar Guandicu, a 20-year-old undocumented immigrant from El Salvador, already arrested for attacking women in Rock Creek Park.
Was he arrested before Chandra went missing?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so hypothetically, he definitely could have been involved in this potentially.
Yes, hypothetically, that is correct.
Was his MO tying the runner's pants around their ankles?
I don't know. They never mentioned that. Guandico had denied attacking Chandra. The MPD instead put much of its focus on the revelation that Chandra had been having an extramarital affair with Congressman Gary Condit. By then, Condit's name had been cleared, though the public's obsession with the case had only grown. Due to the cloud of suspicion raised by the intense media focus on the missing intern and the later revelation of the affair, Condit lost his bid for re-election in 2002. On May 28, 2002, the Levy family organized a memorial service at the Modesto Central Plaza that drew over 1,200 people. Speakers at the ceremony included Chandra's brother, grandmother, great-aunt, and friends. About a year later, on May 27, 2003, Chandra's remains were buried in Lakewood Memorial Park Cemetery at Houston, California, near her hometown of Modesto. Now, following a series of investigative reports by the Washington Post in 2008, the MPD followed up and finally obtained a warrant on March 3, 2009 to arrest Igmar Gwandiku, identified and dismissed by the MPD 8 years earlier. On May 1st of 2001, the day Chandra Levy vanished, Gwandiku had apparently missed a day of work at his construction job. Furthermore, his former landlady recalled that his face appeared scratched and bruised at around that time.
That doesn't look very good for him.
True.
We know that Chandra was sleeping with Kandit, but doesn't necessarily mean that's the reason she went missing and was murdered.
I'm just telling you the story at this point. This is how it has progressed.
I know, but I think it's natural for someone to be listening, such as myself, and to think, oh, well, how could Condit not have something to do with this? But stranger things have happened.
True. He had been convicted of assaulting 2 other women in Rock Creek Park around the time of Chandra's disappearance and was still in prison on those convictions when the arrest warrant on Chandra's death was issued. Prosecutors alleged that Gwandiku had attacked and tied up Chandra in a remote area of the park and left her to die of dehydration and exposure. During the trial, prosecution witness Armando Morales, who shared a cell with Gwandiku at the U.S. Penitentiary in Kentucky, testified that Gwandiku was concerned about being transferred between prisons in 2006 because of inmate violence against suspected rapists. Morales stated that Gwandiku, a fellow member of the Mara Salvatrucha gang, confided to him that he had killed Chandra while trying to rob her, but said that he did not rape her. The prosecution rested their case on November 10th, while dropping 2 out of the 6 charges against Gwandiku, sexual assault and murder associated with that assault. On November 15th, the defense rested its case without calling Gwandiku to the stand. Other prison witnesses called by the defense refuted Morales' testimony. On November 2010, Gwandiku was convicted of murdering Chandra. He was sentenced in February 2011 to 60 years in prison. Prosecutors on the case heavily relied upon statements from Gwandiku's former cellmate Armando Morales, but it soon came to light that Morales had been lying. A woman named Babs Prowler befriended Morales, who eventually confided in her that he had lied under oath. Prowler gave this information to investigators, and due to the prosecutor's request, a judge dismissed charges against Gwandiku. In June of 2015, Gwandiku was granted a new trial. On July 8th of 2016, prosecutors announced that they would not proceed with the case against Gwandiku and would instead seek to have him deported. In March of 2017, Gwandiku lost his bid to remain in the United States and was deported to his native country, El Salvador, on May 5th of 2017. Some facts. In 2010, though a small amount of DNA was found on Chandra's clothing, it didn't match Gwandiku or Condit.
Ooh, that's interesting. But where on her clothing?
I have no idea.
That's so interesting.
This is the first that I've heard of this, actually, and I've known this case. And second is, I wonder if they've done ancestry DNA on that one.
Yes, I ask where it is because who knows how easy it would be for somebody who's not involved for their DNA to transfer onto her clothing. I don't know.
I don't know. I do find interesting that they did find DNA since her clothes were out there over a year. Now, maybe it was on her pants on the inside and had dried out, like the guy raped her, if she was raped.
Was she for sure raped?
We don't know any of that. But if they found semen on her clothing and they have not released that, then I would say that's a pretty good indication that it was this individual.
Yeah, that's possible. But didn't
they say that they took a while before they found the DNA?
No, nothing of that sort.
If they had found semen, wouldn't they have tested that DNA against both Condit and Kwenduku? And wouldn't that have been shown at the trial to be like, hey, there was semen here and it's Kwenduku's, shut and closed?
Maybe back then they weren't able to test the DNA because it was a small amount. Now they can. They can test a small amount and figure out a lot more than they could before.
Can I ask, what does the family think? Who do they think was involved?
They have a lot of questions. They don't think it's Kwenduku and they don't think it's Condit now.
I would not be surprised if they were right.
The Levy family was again left with questions regarding their daughter's death. For instance, when exactly did she leave her apartment? Was she alone? Had she planned to meet someone at the park? Or did she simply plan to go on a solo run? Was her killer someone she knew, or was she murdered by a stranger? Sandra's murder remains unsolved. My closing thoughts. The Chandra Levy case left an indelible mark on the American public's consciousness, and the emotional scars remain. It raised questions about media sensationalism, the influence of politics on criminal investigations, and the way missing person cases are handled. It also highlighted the heartbreaking reality of a young woman with so much potential, whose life was taken too soon, and whose family, who only wanted answers, was left with nothing but painful uncertainty for many years. Though the case of Chandra Levy remains a topic of intrigue, it also a reminder of how deeply personal and heartbreaking the search of truth can be. For her family, it's a reminder of a daughter, a sister, and a person with so much promise taken too soon. Do you guys have any questions, thoughts?
Well, it's sad, as in every case we discover, and Chandra was so young. She had so much more life yet to live. She was just starting her life in so many ways, and she seemed to be enjoying it. She seemed to be enjoying her relationships and her work that she was doing. So it's definitely a tragedy that she wasn't able to grow old and experience life more and just really get to have the experience of living life and going through life. So that's very sad. And being in DC, living in a world where there's a political aspect to the city, just makes it a little bit more airy and mysterious, I think. Not that I think that Condit was involved, but there are so many other unknowns being in a city of DC. I wonder, who knows what else could have been going on. Also makes you wonder, okay, if it's not Condit or Kwenduku, what other person was potentially attacking women or decided to attack Chandra in Rock Creek Park?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. There are two possible suspects that seem like they could both have a motive or have had something to do with it, and yet both of them did not turn out to be part of it. So it's very confusing and frustrating because you had two viable options, and now that they've been cleared, you're left with nothing. It's like, where do you go from here?
The way I see it is Condit was easy because he was having an affair with her and he was a political figure. However, he really didn't have anything to do with it. He was just having an affair and it just became a big thing. It's their private life, as far as I'm concerned. However, with Kwenduku, his first cases were on the women he attacked. He had not killed anyone.
That's a good point.
True.
And they were found, obviously, because they were able to identify him. However, Chandra probably was killed. She was attacked, tied up, and killed. So I think it may have been someone who took it as an opportunity. It just happened. It wasn't someone who was doing this a lot, because the police never say that this was happening a lot except for Kwenduku doing it. So if he didn't do it, was there someone else doing it too? They never say anything. Didn't anyone not know? They don't talk about it.
It could have definitely been opportunistic, that's for sure. And being in DC, it's almost like a house of cards in some ways. And I'm wondering also, What did Chandra want to share with her aunt that she didn't before? I think it was her aunt, right? That she had something to share with?
Correct.
What also makes you wonder, is that somehow related at all in what caused her death, or is it not related?
It may not be related with her death at all.
It may not. And I will say there has been no motive brought up as to why Condit would have been involved. So they never said, oh, well, she was pregnant or whatever. There was never really any motive given as to why Condit would want her dead, which makes it, in my opinion, less likely that he would have a reason to get rid of her, especially because he was having other affairs. None of these women, as far as I know, have ended up dead. I just don't see a motive for why he would want to kill Chandra.
I don't think he wanted Sandra killed. I
Right.
just think it happened that she was killed and he was having an affair with her. And the police went down that rabbit hole because
Yeah.
it was big news, sensational. And they were just like, wow, this is wonderful. They had a lot of media and all that. To me, whoever did it either knew her or didn't. It doesn't matter. They have DNA. I hope they are able to do genealogy DNA and find out if they can. I don't know. It's a small amount, but nowadays they can replicate even a small amount to get more. It
Well-
just depends how many markers they have on this DNA.
Well, it also makes you wonder, what if it matched?
It didn't match Konduku. It didn't match Conduit. So they really need to go back and look at it. I bet you they also did some searches in databases. So I think at this point, their best bet is to do an ancestry DNA.
If there's enough of it, because I know in order to do that, you need enough DNA.
That is true. The other thing is if they can replicate it, because now they can replicate DNA. This is the first I ever heard that they had DNA. It's interesting to know where they found it because they obviously did it to see whether or not it was conduits and Guaducu. I'm assuming that maybe it was like something they found like semen DNA. They're just not saying.
It's exposed to the elements, rain, snow. How would that DNA even still be there? Semen lasts a while? Is that what it is?
It could dry. If it was semen, and I don't know if it is, that's exactly what I was thinking. The weather could have really damaged it. DC gets cold, there's snow, rain, whatever. But if it was maybe semen and it dried, and then it was tucked away in her pants somehow and protected from the element, it could be. If it was on her undie and her undie was in the pants and it was somehow tucked in, it could protect it. I don't know. I just find it very interesting.
And we also don't know what they know and don't know.
They did not handle the case very well in the past. I'm hoping maybe they do some genealogy DNA and just figure it out.
I do know that from what I remember from previous cases is you can have enough DNA to compare it to a suspect, but not enough for a genealogy test because I think they need like 37 markers of DNA or something like that. And if you want to do even further genealogy tests, you can have 67 or 111 markers. So I think if that's not enough DNA or for some reasons there's something wrong with it, they may only be able to test it against subjects and not genealogy.
Yes, unless they can replicate it. I mean, there are ways you could take some part of DNA and replicate it. I just don't know how many markers they have. That is true.
And also if they don't have the funding for it, because I think it's expensive.
It is. They were supposed to get help from the FBI. I just don't know nowadays.
Yeah.
Everybody, I want to thank you for listening to us this week. We love our listeners, and because of you, we do this podcast. Your help and engagement really helps the podcast grow. If you enjoyed this episode, please text a friend and family member to listen to our podcast. Until next time, make sure you stay on the eerie side. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Be safe.